released in 2022. The highly anticipated follow-up to GameToys' Final Fantasy VII 6-scale line is finally here. This unlicensed Zack fare from Crisis Core is released alongside a separately sold add-on, featuring an additional figure body and costume, with the Soldier's second-class color theme, which is perfect for utilizing the alternate head sculpt that comes with every base release, so you can recreate the younger version of Zack, whom NGO lovingly refers to as Zack the Puppy. Starting with the head sculpts, I am once again taken aback by how absolutely stellar they look. Not only did GameToys nail the two different styles, the hair sculpts are even more refined than previous releases. For every hair spike, the tip is cleaner and sharper. For every hair strand, the textures are even more defined. Not to mention, the likenesses to Zack are indisputable. His signature confidence is shining brightly through these portraits. However, there is an issue particular to old Zack. Take a look at young Zack here. Notice how his head sits on the default body. Compare that to old Zack as he was straight out of the box. It looks like he's suffering from a turtleneck syndrome because the neck peg is nested too deep in the head sculpt. Sadly, the peg itself is glued in there pretty well, so I couldn't remove it without risking damage. Now, there is a temporary solution. Also, a big shout out to Spillner over at Collector Freaks for this one too. Basically, you can apply a thin layer of removable putty on the ball joint. Funny is one way of describing how it looks, but this does work rather well, as the adhesive will hold the head sculpt in place without sacrificing articulation. The putty can also be removed without leaving any residue, so you can reapply as needed. It's not a secure fit, of course, so definitely use caution as to not send the head sculpt flying when you move the figure. Well, that was a mouthful. Now let's see how the costume fares. If you have the Soldier's second-class body add-on, the most notable difference is that it's more of a royal blue, as opposed to the deep navy blue on the first-class uniform. The base of the harness is also darker, yet the suspenders are of a lighter brown. Other than that, almost everything here is the same from Cloud's release. The pauldrons are each detailed, with some weathering on the surface and faded paint along the edges, though I'm not sure where this ornate design on the top ridges from. Don't recall seeing that in the remake either. Anyways, the pauldrons are connected to the harness at 2 points, allowing for a robust range of motion. But as a trade-off, they don't sit nearly as tapered as Cloud's, which could be a reason these sculpted suspenders are so loose. Also, unlike Cloud, the base of the harness rises quite a bit. I tried pulling down the whole piece to little success. The shirt, pants, and boots are just as brilliant. Zack is a little taller, so the pants are tailored to keep up with this. And with a bit of futzing, the blooming effect on the cuffs are back too. And finally, the boots are exactly the same as before, right down to the color and size. Unsurprisingly, the articulation is also not too different, as the base body is amongst the many returning elements. So let's plow through a few highlights before diving into yet another issue. The range of motion for the head is excellent. Once again, if you're using the aforementioned putty fix, take caution to secure the head. And without the bolt-studded cuff design, Zack's gloves are much easier to deal with. It's still highly recommended that you heat up the hand parts before taking them on and off. Oh, and the second-class costume add-on comes with its own pairs of interchangeable arms, plus another pair of sword-gripping hands. The torso movement is somewhat limited compared to Cloud, but from the waist down, the pelvis, legs, and knees are more of the same old. I was afraid Zack's legs will be disproportionately long to highlight the height difference, but this really isn't an issue. And I'm still not over the fact that these boots can look so good, while maintaining some degree of articulations. The most interesting thing though, has to be the interchangeable seamless arms. This time, not only are they even more flexible than the jointed counterpart, they're also beefier than Cloud's, which only makes sense as Zack is just a bigger dude. And while we're on Cloud, you might recall his arms having these metallic pegs. They worked fine at first, but the pegs had since worn down the sockets a bit, so Cloud's up and down swings had gotten really soft. GameToys remedied this by gluing the metal peg in a plastic sleeve for added friction. And right away, it is instantly noticeable that everything is much sturdier. The arms can be raised reasonably high, even if the pauldrons are in the way. Sadly though, the seam lines on the side of the arms are also more noticeable. But worst of all, the rubber can easily be stained by the shirt. In fact, there was so much excess dye in the shirt that these stains occurred in the first day of filming, so I quickly put the jointed arms back on. Even stranger, the stains actually faded substantially over the week I spent waiting for the second-class add-on to deliver. I swear I'm not making this up, and I made sure I didn't mix them up with the new seamless arms, so I'm not sure how or why that happened. Please, let me know in the comments if you have more insights. Either ways, I'll be leaving the seamless arms off, which is a shame because they're so much better than the old ones. Keeping with the traditions, GameToys' selection of accessories are small but meaningful. The paint app on the Buster sword is looking fresh. I'm sure Angeal would be proud. It's also got that proper gold trims from the FF7 compilation's redesign. GameToys also included a pack of tiny materials for fitting into the slots, though I'd argue this was more for the symmetry of the sword mounting mechanic, which, like last time, utilizes a connector that's disguised as a materia. Needless to say, the tool for getting materias unstuck also makes a return. Next is the standard issue Soldier Sword, which is actually made of metal. The paintwork is also remarkable, as it's got more depth than a simple flat silver. GameToys even have a mounting solution for this sword as well. Just clip this clear piece over the sword and attach it to the back of the harness. Now this die-cast sword is rather hefty, so keep an eye out, as the mount does slip off from time to time. The excess space on the harness plus the weight also make the sword really slanted in some angles, but that's still better than slipping it between the harness like I did with the VTS version. Oh, and another design upgrade is that the pommels for these swords are entirely removable, as opposed to Cloud's where only the cover comes off, which makes fitting the sword in the hand so much easier. Next we have this dumb apple of the Benora White Tree. It's got the appropriate purple colored skin, along with a sculpted bite mark to represent the scene where Zack finally gets to taste the gift of the goddess. The little pieces of papers packed with the accessories are actually the 89th and final letter that Aerith wrote to Zack during his absence. There's one for each language in Japanese, Chinese, and English. Sadly, I can't show you the English one because mine came with 2 Japanese copies. Otherwise, it's quite an effective accessory for how simple it is. Lastly, this hexagonal display stand is the same with every GameToys release so far, right down to the style of the nameplate. And now my favorite part of this video, where I get to unironically bust out the VTS Cloud for size comparison. I'm gonna skip the in-depth comparison to the VTS Zack, because it's basically gonna be the same from Cloud's review. Though I will say, the diorama base from the VTS Collector's Edition Zack works really well with the GameToys version as well. Then we have another customary showcase with the Super Duck figures, Aerith and Tifa. Maybe someday, we'll get to see GameToys' version of these two ladies as well. And finally, here's the GameToys Cloud and Sephiroth. Unlike the VTS versions, the heights for these figures are at least in line with each other. Oh, and one more thing. The remake Buster Sword from Cloud's release has the same dimensions as Zack's. That is except for the slightly larger rectangular handguard, which makes it a little tricky to get around Zack's longer hair and pauldron. But Zack can also mount the remake sword on his back for that Crisis Core reunion setup. So there you have it, the 1/6 scale Zack Fair by GameToys. Despite a few months of delay, the turtleneck and staining issues still managed to sneak their way into the final product. Now, whether or not that's a deal breaker is gonna be a matter of preference, but GameToys definitely seems to be aware of product feedbacks, as evident with the reinforced shoulder joints, smarter sword pommel designs, and the improved head sculpts. Hopefully, the blunders of this release won't repeat themselves in the next. Though with GameToys' reputation, the discourse for even the tiniest mishap seems inevitable. But for me at least, I'm beyond grateful that such a figure even exists. So while this release does have its share of flaws, GameToys' unrelenting pursuit to make the best figures is not something I'll take for granted.